Blog Talk Radio.
If in life's magic you believe, and in yourself and in your dreams, believe in fairy books and fairy queens. When you believe, my darling girl.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you for tuning in to Voices of the Sacred Feminine, the extended edition, and for spending the next hour here with us and our guest tonight, Barbara Walker. I'm Karen Tate, your host, and I hope that little snippet of Jenna Green's song, Believe, has whet your appetite for more of her lovely music. Well, we're knee-deep in our Foremothers and Way Shower series, and I thank you for all your listener interest out there. You see, hosts can actually see how many people are listening to the show, and you're definitely out there tuning in, so thanks for your listener loyalty. And don't forget, the series was inspired by you, after all, and I just followed through on the brainstorm you gave me to put the series together. It was you who asked, where are Rianne Eisler, Carol Chris, Genevieve Vaughn, and Barbara Walker? Well, they're here every week, usually on Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, and still generously giving more of their time for you to hear what's stoking their passions these days. And as I said, tonight our guest is Barbara Walker. She needs no introduction. I don't know of many people without a book of hers on their bookshelves in their libraries. The list of the books she's written is quite extensive, and I don't think any Foremother series would be complete without her. She's loved and appreciated by many for bringing people to the goddess and inspiring them. And we'll get more into her body of work when we begin our chat. Well, our regularly scheduled show is actually tomorrow when we have Genevieve Vaughn on the show. She's popular for her gift economy ideas, and she's also the foundress of the Sekhmet Temple outside Las Vegas. Then we take a break for Thanksgiving, and we're back the first week of December with Patricia Monahan. And to keep you updated, we've just booked Christina Biaggi on the show. We also have booked Heidi Gottner-Abendroth, who edited the new book that everyone's talking about, Societies of Peace, Matriarchies Past, Present, and Future. And then Michael York, a fella, is going to join us. He's just presented at the American Academy of Religion and who will be presenting at the Parliament of World Religions, and his topic here on the show, as well as at the AAR and the Parliament of World Religions. His topic is Men Who Love the Goddess. Let's see. Now, if I just want to mention, if you're new to Voices of the Sacred Feminine here on Blog Talk, because we're picking up new listeners every week, we can take your caller questions. In fact, I know there's someone hanging on the line right now in area code 512, and if you're patient, we're going to get to you soon, so please stay with us. You can dial in toward the end of our interview, and the number is 718-766-4662. When I see your call on the switchboard, I'll identify you by your area code and welcome you to have a chance to talk to our guest at a good stopping point in the interview. Again, that number is 718-766-4662. And if you can't listen live or don't want to be on the air, remember, you can always email me some of your questions in advance, as many have done tonight for Barbara Walker. But keep tuning in each Wednesday night at 6. Don't miss us. In fact, you can join Blog Talk as a regular listener, and they will send reminders to your email box of our shows, so you won't forget about our awesome guests each week. And please, if you are a fan of the show, please indicate that by selecting us as a favorite on Blog Talk Radio. Well, with our opening announcements over, it's time to get to that segment you tell me you like so much called What's the Buzz? When we talk about what's happening out there in the world related to goddess advocates or issues related to women, girls, and ideals of the sacred feminine. So I will just ask Barbara to have just a tiny bit more patience with us, and then the rest of the hour will be devoted to her body of work and her new book coming out next year, Man-Made God. So, with the issue of abortion on the front page in the headline, that's our What's the Buzz topic. And the first little snippet I'd like to share is from Gordon Newby of Religious Dispatch. He had an article on the blog, House Health Care Bill Discriminates Against Religious Freedom. Gordon says, abortion is not a liberal, secular invention. There are examples in Jewish, Muslim, even Christian theologies, and in Buddhist and Hindu traditions of instances in which abortion is justified. He says if the House Care Bill is allowed to stand and becomes the basis for new legislation, religious Americans across the spectrum of faiths will be subjugated to limitations that will contravene their faith's most well-considered and cherished views about the major questions of life, reproduction, and freedom of religious conscience, freedoms imagined by our nation's founders as central to the nature of our country. And some excerpts from another article I found interesting on abortion was from Katha Pollitt of The Nation in her article, Whose Team Is It Anyway? And she says, I don't want to hear right now about the Stupak-Pitts Amendment banning abortion coverage from federally subsidized health care policies. What I don't want to hear is it's the price of reform, and pro-choice women should shut up and take one for the team. If you want to rebuild the American welfare state, Peter Beinhart writes in the Daily Beast, there's no alternative than for Democrats to abandon cultural issues like gender and racial equality. Well, Katha says, hey, Peter, Representative Stupak and your 64 Democratic supporters, Jim Wallace and other anti-choice progressive Christians, men, why don't you take one for the team for a change and see how you like it? For example, she says, budget hawks in Congress say they'll vote against the bill because it's too expensive. Well, maybe you could win them over if you volunteered to cut out funding for male-exclusive stuff, like prostate cancer, Viagra, male infertility, vasectomies, growth hormone shots for short little boys, long-term care for macho guys who don't wear motorcycle helmets, and I don't know, psychotherapy for pedophile priests. Men could always pay in advance for an insurance policy rider, as women blithely are told they can do if Stupak becomes a part of the final bill. Well, she goes on in this article, and it's very interesting. I'm not going to share any more of it with you, but you can find it at thenation.com, and it's called Whose Team Is It Anyway? And if you're wondering why I consistently have this segment opening each show, well, it's because the programming has been so utterly pervasive. We have to constantly educate about women's issues. We have to inoculate ourselves against ignorance, intolerance, and those insidious isms. We have to stand up, in this case, for women's reproductive rights. Can you imagine the powerful priestesses of ancient times being told what they could or could not do with their own bodies? It was these priestesses whose voices strongly challenged that new religion, Christianity. By the way, you can also say that abortion was a central issue in the silencing of the Western woman's political voice as Christianity assumed state power. Priestesses who practiced and taught abortion, among many other things, were the first targets of the patriarchy. They had been a consistent voice against tyranny for centuries in Greece, so they were understandably a bit of an obstacle for early Christians. So seriously, you cannot underplay the role of abortion in the control of women. Okay, the bees are released from my bonnet for another week, and now to our guest tonight, Barbara. Let me tell you a little bit about her in case you've just landed on our planet from some otherworldly craft. Barbara Walker is the author of numerous articles and 22 books on such subjects as feminist history, comparative religion and mythology, symbolism, rituals, mineral lore, the Tarot, and the I Ching, an autobiography, a novel, and a book of short stories, her Feminist Fairy Tales, her 1,100-page Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets, a textbook for women's studies, received a Book of the Year award from the London Times. She's also received the Women Making History Award from New Jersey Now, the Humanist Heroine of the Year Award from the American Humanist Association, and the Olympia Brown Award from the Unitarian Universalist Association. As an artist, she created complete sets of original paintings for the Barbara Walker Tarot deck and the I Ching of the Goddess cards. As a knitter, she has worked as a professional designer and has published 7 books that are standard references for every other knitwear designer. She's the inventor of more than 1,000 original, never-before-seen pattern stitches, more than any other single source known to history. She has presented many lectures and sermons for Unitarian Humanist audiences and has been a leader of women's spirituality groups. Thanks to her work in exposing the lies and the sexism behind patriarchal religion, she's been listed, along with other such notables as Katharine Hepburn, Robert Ingersoll, Voltaire, Hypatia, Oscar Wilde, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Thomas Jefferson, and many others in that prestigious publication, Who's Who in Hell. In 2000, one of her books was also Restoring the Goddess, Equal Rights for Modern Women, and her newest book is coming out next year, Man-Made God. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for coming back to Voices of the Sacred Feminine for a second time.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Barbara, why don't we start off by you telling us about your brand new book, Man-Made God?
Well, the title, of course, is a three-way pun. Man made God, which is a sentence, or man-made God, man made into God, or man made God, as in the case of Jesus.
Very clever.
So
I like that.
It's based on the idea that, of course, human beings do create their deities, and men created a male god to replace the goddess, who was the major deity of all human beings from the very beginning. I might quote a little bit from that book to start off.
Sure, go right ahead. We have an hour tonight, so we don't have to shortchange any of our discussion.
Okay, this is from one of my essays in the book, and it's a quote from Babylonian scriptures, more than 3,000 years ago, and it is an address to the goddess. It says, "Thou art the light of the world, thou art the light of heaven. Supreme is thy might, O Lady, exalted art thou above all gods. Thou renderest judgment, and thy decision is righteous. Unto thee are subject the laws of the earth and the laws of heaven. All at thy name the earth and the heavens shake, and all the gods they tremble. The spirits of heaven tremble at thy name, and men hold it in awe. Glorious one whom all the spirits of heaven fear, who subduest all angry gods, mighty above all the rulers of heaven, opener of the womb of all women, great is thy light. Shining light of heaven, light of the world," which is incidentally a phrase later applied to Jesus, "enlightener of the places where men dwell, who gathered together the hosts of the nations, divinity of women, where thou glancest, the dead come to life, the sick rise and walk, and the mind that is distressed is healed when it looks upon thy face. My lady is exalted, my lady is queen." We read a great deal of this kind of thing in early pre-Christian, pre-Judaic scriptures. There are writings from Phoenicia, from Babylon, from Egypt, from all sorts of sources of the ancient world along these lines. So we know that the mother goddess was supreme way back there.
Was that directed to a particular goddess?
The goddess.
Just the general
one.
Goddess.
Yeah.
Okay.
She had many names, but she
Sure.
was, the mother creator of the universe and so forth. I believe they called her Ishtar in this particular one. She was also Astarte and Ashtoreth and, all sorts of names. In Egypt, she was Isis, Hathor, so forth. The names are so many that she was also known the thousand-named goddess.
Absolutely.
This is from another essay called Women and Religion. There can be little doubt that the sexism of Western civilization is the product of its religion. Fathers of the Church were bitterly opposed to the women who had been seen in earlier centuries as beings created in the image of the goddess. St. Augustine declared that his God made man to rule and woman to obey. St. Anthony said, quote, "When you see a woman, consider that you face not a human being, but the devil himself." The woman's voice is the hiss of the snake, end quote. Other early theologians insisted that no savage beast is as harmful as a woman, and that the social subjection and enslavement of women is essential to a Christian salvation. And furthermore, quote, although the dragon is fierce and the asp is cunning, woman is the malice of both, end quote. So much for the fathers of the church. Huh?
So much. Well, and Martin Luther compared women to weeds and boys were good crops.
Right.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff out there, and we didn't have souls and all of that all through history.
Right.
Well, Barbara, I know you consider yourself an atheist now. Is that correct? Or a humanist?
I would say a humanist. An atheist is technically a right term because it says atheist means not God, not a deity. I do not believe in a deity in the traditional sense. However, I do think that the image of the goddess is essential in a way. I say in another essay, perhaps we should return to recognition of the great Mother Goddess not as a transcendent deity, because that particular image can't be upheld, but as a lively symbol of our home planet, of whose substance we are made, and to whom we owe all we can know of life, beauty, and enlightenment. Now,
well,
some people understand the goddess as a metaphor for the life force in general, but they see little difference from the God concept other than a change of pronouns. If both genders of deity are constructs of the human imagination, they ask, how can one be any more valid than the other? And the answer to that is that the validity of a religious image depends not on its empirically ascertainable reality or lack of same, but on its effect on human behavior and acculturization. The goddess image surely did support more tolerant, peaceful, caring societies than the God image, whose worshippers usually tended toward war, violence, and puritanical asceticism.
Well, when I'm out there, giving lectures or talking about the goddess, I always talk about her in terms of deity, archetype, and ideal. But the reason I asked you the question, were you a humanist, atheist, was because I wondered if when you were growing up, did you belong to a religious group, and how did you, find the strength to turn away from that patriarchal religion as a child?
Well, as a child, I went to an Episcopalian Sunday school, and I was constantly asking questions. The teacher told me to sit down and shut up. But there was one occasion.
You uppity woman, you.
When I was about 7, I was deeply grieving for the death of a very much loved dog, and the minister came around to visit my mother. And I asked him how I would meet my dog again in heaven. And he said I would not meet my dog in heaven because dogs have no souls and God does not allow animals in heaven. And I was so distressed at this, which is incidentally still the teaching of all the Protestant and Catholic churches. I said, well, what good is heaven if there are no pets? He's told me that I wouldn't meet any animals, but I would meet all my relatives. So I said I would be willing to trade a couple of aunts and uncles for my dog if God would allow that.
And I'm sure he wasn't a cat lover either.
No, but there was no negotiating. And eventually I just gave up and I said, I don't want to go to your nasty old heaven and your mean old God, and I stamped my foot and I ran away crying. And my mother made me come back and apologize, although I wasn't quite sure what for. And all this was, it caused me to dislike church even more because I had to go and listen to this guy talking, and I would sit there hating him for his attitude toward dogs.
And that's how it started.
I don't know how dog lovers manage today because the theology is still the same. They tell them animals have no souls.
It's probably like most things. We cherry pick what we want to believe and, leave aside what we don't.
Right. And I've had such very deep, loving relationships with animals through my life, cats and dogs, even horses. I think that if love is a quality of the soul, then animals have as much soul as many humans, more than many.
Oh, absolutely. That's without a doubt.
Yeah. Anyway, by the time I was a teenager, I was really afraid of this God because I read stuff in the Bible that made him out a brutal, jealous, terrible person. I mean, a monster. The Old Testament especially depicts him as criminal. I mean, he kills in spite of saying "Thou shalt not kill." He orders these huge slaughters of everything, every child, every infant, every animal, every person in the city. You shall not let any of them live. You shall bash the baby's brains out against the rocks. And, this kind of directive.
Tells men to sacrifice their sons.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, his own son, so-called, he needed that blood also. Anyway, I really was very sort of fearful, but I had this sort of cornered rat courage. And one night when there was a violent thunderstorm going on, I thought, I just cannot bear having this thing hanging over my head. And I gave him his chance. I lay there in bed and I looked up and I said, I hate you. Then I gritted my teeth and I waited for the lightning to destroy me. And it didn't come. And then I said it again, and the lightning didn't come. And all of a sudden I realized I was speaking into a telephone with nobody on the other end. And the next morning I was free. It was an epiphany. I woke up and went to school the next day, and I felt so liberated. All the fear was gone. I had faced up to the fear and surmounted it.
I bet that your mother never got you back to a catechism class.
Oh, well, actually, I was confirmed in the Episcopal Church, but I had a hard time with it because in those days, I don't know if they still do, but they were teaching transubstantiation in the High Episcopal Church, and I was told that this wafer that I was eating was human flesh, and I was drinking human blood, and I was feeling really sick.
Cannibalism, huh?
Absolutely. They're making a cannibal of me. I almost threw up. I had a good imagination, and I believed what they told me.
Well, you were lucky you didn't share too many of your thoughts with your fellow students, or you might have actually got kicked out of school.
Well, no, this has nothing to do with school. This was the church.
Oh, well, right.
The school was not a church school, not a parochial school.
Okay.
But I did have a Catholic friend, Patsy, who told me that I and my whole family were going to go to hell for sure because we didn't belong to the right church.
Oh, they tell me that now. My family are still Catholics in New Orleans, and
really?
My cousins are praying for my soul. I said, I'm not real worried.
Well, all the interesting people are going to go to hell. If you go to heaven, you have to hobnob with people like Jerry Falwell. I mean, this would be worse than hell as far as I'm concerned.
Well, just a curious, interjection here. We went and saw the movie 2012 over the weekend, and one of the scenes was all of these people gathered in St. Peter's Square with the Pope. And, the rapture didn't come. Jesus didn't appear. They weren't saved. I'm kind of wondering why, the church doesn't have these truth squads out telling, talking out against the movie, saying that it's blasphemy or something.
Well, the Catholic Church has been very much downplaying the apocalyptic stuff. It's the fundies who are doing that nowadays.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church has realized that in order to appeal to intelligent people, you just don't talk about this nonsense anymore. and they're still trying to win back the intelligent, which is probably a hopeless task, but they're...
Well, I'm sure you know more about this than me, but for the sake of our listeners, you raise a question in my mind. I know that evangelicals are starting to promote this new feminism, which seems like they're honoring women, but I think when you look close, it's really about teaching women to be dependent and submissive.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, and what do you think about the younger women today who are so afraid of the word feminism and, who think we've actually achieved equality?
Well, I have a quote from historian Arnold Toynbee, a famous historian, and he says, quote, "Religion and its practices have consistently been one of women's fiercest enemies. The fact that many women do not realize this shows how thorough the brainwashing and the intimidation have been." And I think that many churches couldn't run 3 weeks without the women who do all the work and get none of the credit.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Ingersoll, whose writings I earnestly recommend, says as follows, quote, "Priests, theologians have taken advantage of women, of their gentleness, and their love of approbation. They have lived upon women's hopes and fears like vampires. They've made them responsible for the sins of the world and have taught them the slave virtues, meekness, humility, implicit obedience. And they have fed their minds with mistakes, mysteries, and absurdities. They have endeavored to weaken and shrivel their brains until to them there would be no possible connection between evidence and belief, between fact and faith. Superstition, the mother of those hideous twins, fear and faith, still rules the world and will until the mind of woman ceases to be the property of priests." End quote. Good old Robert Ingersoll. He is so readable, even today, and I recommend him to all women. Now, Naomi Wolf has said that the fibs of religion are still crippling the young women today because there is a fib called post-feminism. And it's claimed that young women don't want to be called feminists because feminism is not sexy. She writes, "It would be stupid and sad if the women of the near future had to fight the same battles all over again from the beginning just because of young women's isolation from older women. And it would be pathetic if young women had to go back to the beginning because we are taken in by an unoriginal 20-year campaign to portray the women's movement as not sexy." And that pretty much sums it up.
It's not sexy.
Well, the young women apparently have not read the sources. They have not realized what women have researched and what they have brought forth. They're not scholars. They don't have to be scholars, of course, but they should understand women's history ever since the suffragists up until today. And it has been a very tough road, and they are reaping the benefits, of course, but don't know where they came from.
Well, and I don't mean to be offensive with this. I'm just sort of making an observation. But it seems to me our country is severely suffering from anti-intellectualism.
Absolutely.
And it really scares me, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
So, I mean, oftentimes, getting back to the, evangelicals and how they, program the women. I know just down the road here in Southern California, there's a huge evangelical church that tells women grounds for divorce or abandonment and adultery, but not abuse. And, it's almost hard to believe, quite frankly. And I gave a talk at a feminist conference last year and got to meet a lot of these women who are still in these, churches. And, we got to know each other. And I asked several of them, why do you stay? Because they know what's going on within the church. They acknowledge a feminine face of God. They say that they are trying to change things from within. They don't want their communities to fall apart, their families to fall apart, their social networks to fall apart. Do you buy that? I mean, do you think that's? I mean, maybe for some, but it. What do you think about that? I mean, I know some women say, well, they should just quit. How can they perpetuate this? Because that's, some say that's what they're doing.
They don't know any better. What pronoun do they use for God? He, it, she.
Well, in this particular group, it was. I met the women at the Faith and Feminist Lutheran conference in San Francisco. It was Pastor Stacy Bourne, female pastor, at herchurch.org on the web if you want to look them up in San Francisco. All of their imagery actually in the church is female. Obviously, like I said, pastor is female. So, they're very progressive, but at the conference there were women that weren't quite so progressive, but they're sort of buying into this idea that there's mother and father. Mm-hmm. So they're saying he and she, I guess, is probably the most general answer.
Well, that's not so bad.
It's some progress, I guess.
Yeah, that's progress, but they have a ways to go. I think that the other churches who are still talking about he are giving this image to women, denying them the actual act of creating, which is what women do. They create life out of their own bodies. For more than 2,000 years, patriarchal societies have been doing this, making God in the image of man and referring to the result as he. Now, in order to qualify as a he, a being must have male genitals and glands that produce male hormones. Gender is a function of physicality, and if God has no physical body, then God can't be a he, but an it.
Right.
But do they ever say, blessed is it?
No, they sure don't.
Even the Holy Ghost is now called he, but in some early forms of Christianity, notably Gnosticism, this entity was female.
Right, or gender neutral. Yeah.
Yeah, the Trinities were modeled on the mother, father, and child, like the Trinity of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, which was widely popular during the early church period. And some early Christians worshipped the Trinity of God, Mary, and Jesus, although St. Augustine and some of the other fathers condemned the very idea of a Trinity as a pagan abomination because it was a pagan idea.
Well, they forget, don't they, how much they borrowed from paganism?
All of it. Every bit. There is not one single truly original statement anywhere in the Gospels. They're all taken from other sources.
But what an inconvenient truth that is.
And even if, we don't really know what Jesus ever said that was different from what anybody else was saying. There were all these many sacrificed saviors preaching the end of the world all over the Middle East in those times. There's no trying to find the real Christian origin is like trying to peel an onion. There's no center. You take off layer after layer as coming from paganism, and there's nothing there. The virgin birth, the solstitial birth, the myrrh, frankincense, and gold, the trip into Egypt, the three magi, all of that was pagan. The whole story. And
but you're such a blasphemer, though.
Actually, what I am is a scholar. And
I realize.
You can find all those facts in lots and lots of books.
Oh, I know, but I'm kidding, and I'm kidding. I go through that with my own family. I say, please, just read this or just read that, but they just don't want their apple cart upset,
Right.
They just want to believe what's taught from the pulpit. They don't want to think,
Right.
It's just too scary to have to rethink this stuff. So
one of the reasons for that, I think, is that human beings, like many other herd animals have an innate respect for authority. The human infant is the most helpless of any creature ever born. The human infant is absolutely incapable of caring for itself. It must be totally dependent on someone else who feeds it, tends it, cleans it, everything, for a longer period than any other mammal. And like every mammal, the young has to follow the mother, has to go everywhere she goes, cries when she's not there, needs the mother for comfort, looks to her for teaching, for warmth, for food, for everything. Now, this dependence is somewhere buried in the inner child of every human being. And there are most, I think, who never really outgrow it. There is a dependence there. They want to be told. They want to be told what to think. They want to be told what to do. They feel that they can't do right unless someone tells them what is right. In other words, as you say, they don't want to think. But I have a feeling that this dependency is innate in most of the human species, because we are interdependent creatures. We are herd animals, or pack animals, like dogs, like wolves, or elephants, or dolphins.
So it's easy to become sheeple.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that because of this feeling of dependence, we don't want to be isolated mentally or emotionally. And if you think for yourself, you're thinking apart from the pack.
Well, and it might be, too, that they're afraid to not believe, because what if what they're saying from the pulpit is right and they really might burn in hell or something like that?
Well, that's another part of patriarchy, instilling fear. Patriarchal religions are based on fear. And
we see that alive and well in our current political climate in the last 8 years of the Bush administration, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And you could see it very much illuminated in Islam, where, women are more oppressed than anywhere else. And the women will say they don't feel oppressed. They will say they feel protected. And they don't, well, of course, they are protected, because if they go out on the street and don't wear the burqa, they'll have acid thrown in their faces or something. There are real threats there. But this dependency is, I won't say natural, but it's a part of us. And I think that most people are afraid to lose their childhood beliefs, because that puts them emotionally out there in the world alone. The fear of hell, I think, is probably one of the strongest. I have a Catholic friend whose mother died recently, and she was a very, very devout woman. She never missed Mass. She was a good Catholic all her life. And the last 3 weeks of her life were absolutely miserable, because she was crying and sobbing all day, every day, saying she was sure she was going to go to hell. So her death was terrible, because she had this fear. And that kind of fear is instilled in the very young child, and they never get over it. And even though she was a mature woman, she was in her 80s, and she couldn't die in peace because she had this fear. I think that's pathetic.
Well, yeah, it really is. Well, and I have a theory, and, this is just anecdotal, but I'd love your opinion. I look around, and, I don't have a problem living on the fringe of society, so to speak, not being part of the status quo. It's almost a badge of honor for me. But, I think about some of these women who can't buck the system, who need to be part of this. Like you said, they're, as you just explained. Do you think, though, maybe part of it is maybe, and I don't mean to be offensive, but I'm really curious what you think. Do you think some women just don't want to step up They want to keep the back seat. Then they don't have to be responsible for anything. They don't really want to be empowered equal partners.
Well, that's probably true for some, no doubt about it. But I think that the Church's long-held insistence that Christianity means liberation for women is absolutely false, because the Church has always taught, any church, any patriarchal church has always taught that wives should be their husbands' inferiors, their husbands' slaves, so to speak. They do work all their lives for one man, and they don't get any payment for it, except food and,
shelter,
food and board.
Mm-hmm.
But there are those who say that all of church history adds up to just one long masculine despotism over the female sex. Now, Joseph McCabe has written, quote, "The world grows more humane as it discards Christianity, and that is the subtle grievance of the modern priest. But, of course, the not-so-subtle fear of the modern priest is that women may abandon the churches in sufficient numbers to create an effective boycott."
Well, they're supposed to be losing their congregations. They're supposed to be getting smaller every year.
And I don't think that the feminists are really on the fringe of society. I think they're becoming much more numerous. I am a member of a Unitarian congregation, and a good 75% of the people in this group are agnostic or atheist. They don't believe in any kind of any Judeo-Christian image of God. They can be humanists or pagans or, nature worshipers or whatever, but they don't in any way believe in that traditional God image.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably true of a lot of people who just plain don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go to church. They don't bother with it. They don't read the Bible. They don't care. It's not part of their lives. So I think there are many more actually non-believers in this country than ever get counted. And also many people, when the poll takers come around and say, do you have a religious belief? They say, well, no, I don't have any religion. Do you believe in God? Well, I suppose so, and then they put it down as a yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I really don't think there can be that many stupid people.
Well, I wouldn't put it past the poll taker to put it as Christian necessarily,
oh, yeah. Right.
Especially if they have their own agenda.
Also, the fundamentalist churches have been doing a lot of revising of the Bible to take out some of the really bad stuff, and they've been rewording a lot of things. Where Jesus says you can't deserve heaven unless you hate your mother and father and brother and sister and leave all of those and follow him. They have revised that to take out the word hate, which is in plain Greek, it means hate. It's miseo. They've revised that, and they say, well, you have to follow Jesus or love Jesus more than you love your family or something like that. They've softened a lot of these really nasty things. I don't know if they have gotten around to the passage that says a woman who is raped has to be killed, but they probably have softened that kind of thing too. The fundamentalists call it the book, and it's a Bible from which a lot of the original wordage has been dropped, because it was decided that it was just a little too harsh.
Well, isn't there supposed to be, aren't evangelicals also putting out a new Bible that are taking all the liberal ideas out, or anything they consider liberal ideas? I thought I read that somewhere too.
They've completely redone the Bible, and they're still saying that it's the literal word of God, which is ridiculous.
Oh, shoot. Well, Barbara, do you mind if we try to take our caller's question right now? We'll see if she wants to take a question, and
Sure.
then we'll go on to some of the other questions people have emailed. So, caller, if that's you and the 512 area code, I'm going to try to put you on the air with Barbara and I. So let's see if you're there with us, okay? Hi, you're on the air. Did you have a question for Barbara?
Hi, this is Bendis.
Hi, Bendis.
I actually don't really have a question. The only way I can listen to you is on the phone.
Oh, okay.
Sound on the web, so I'm on the phone just listening and enjoying.
Okay. Well, if you don't have a question, I'll go ahead and mute you just to make sure none of your background noise can be heard. Is that okay?
That would be fine. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, Barbara, why don't you tell us about your second to last book? Am I right that that was Restoring the Goddess, Equal Rights for Modern Women?
Yes.
What would you like to tell us about that one?
Well, that book is not entirely written by me.
Okay.
I did many, many interviews with other women, and it has the other women's words in there as well as mine. Each chapter I start off with stating the theme of the chapter, and then after that I have interviews with other women and their feelings about it and their ideas and so on. So it's a kind of composite book. And it really was very enlightening to me to realize how many women have thought deeply about these things. I think there's a much larger group out there than you seem to believe.
You mean what I call goddess advocates?
Yeah, well, anti-Judeo-Christian women.
Okay.
Whether they're pagans or Wiccans or non-believers or humanists or whatever they are, there are a lot of them, and there's some who simply don't think about it. As I said before, it's not a part of their lives.
Right. Well, as a feminist yourself, I guess it probably goes without saying this whole issue that we're fighting again today in the news, abortion. It must have your hair on fire.
Oh yes. Actually, there's nothing new about that controversy. The women back in ancient Rome knew perfectly well, knew about birth control and knew about abortions, and they had drugs that they could take. Of course, they were very dangerous drugs, but they did affect abortions. And for birth control, they mostly used sponges, natural sponges, which are just now coming back into fashion, I hear. So, they had not many of the primitive matriarchal cultures that were studied by anthropologists have found that the women did not want to have children more often than every 3 or 4 years, and they would nurse them for 3 or 4 years. The nursing period would go on a long time, and they would refrain from having intravaginal sex for that whole period of time so that they could space their children and take care of each one better.
Mm-hmm.
And these things were understood by comparatively primitive people. And I think that, ignorance about these matters was fostered by patriarchal religions because they didn't want women to know about their own functioning, their own sexuality, and so on.
Well, it was too empowering for them.
Yeah, in a way, sure.
Well, and it makes me think about homophobia as well. I mean, homosexuality was not the taboo, I don't think, in ancient times that, Christianity has tried to turn it into.
Oh, quite the contrary. The Greeks and the Romans were all in favor of it. And there is actually, in the Bible, there is only one reference, only one. I think it's in Leviticus, but I'm not entirely sure. About how it's forbidden that a man should lie with another man. Doesn't say anything about female homosexuality. Never.
Mm-hmm.
There's no mention of that at all. But of course we know that the poet Sappho and the women of Lesbos were the founders of lesbianism, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a sacred sisterhood at that time. They felt that it was the natural way for them. So
it's really disheartening when you think about it. I mean, we're talking about it, but really the divisiveness, the hate mongering, the oppression that patriarchal societies, Christianity, have really brought to our culture, when religion is supposed to be something that uplifts us and gives us morality and benchmarks for living to make us better people.
I don't think any patriarchal religion has ever really done that. The history of patriarchy is a very violent history.
But to hear them talk, when they spout their propaganda, they say the opposite,
Of course. But the fact is, I mean, history shows that we've had one war after another. There's never been a Christian century free of intense battles, and for 500 years we had the Inquisition, which was torturing and burning people for absolutely nothing, pretending that they were devil worshippers or witches, when most of them were just ignorant peasants who begged to be told what to confess to because they were being tortured.
Yeah, just stop the agony, please. I'll say anything.
Of course. And that went on for 5 centuries. And the Inquisition is still a portion of the Catholic Church officially. So, and look what's happening in Islam now that they've become fundamentalist. The women are being convinced that that's the way they should live, and very violently convinced too, because if they try to think for themselves, they have bad consequences.
Right.
Several women who have written books about this, Islamic women who've come to the United States and written some very good books. Brigitte Gabriel, for example, she has had death threats. She has to go under guard all the time because they've declared a jihad against her. I mean, it's just horrible. They think they can get away with any amount of violence and rule by fear.
And they have been, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, which brings me to the next question. I mean, you've been at this a long time, and do you see hope? I mean, do you see change? I mean, is it better now than it was when you first started talking about this? I mean, are we making progress? And can you point to anything, yay or nay?
Yeah, I think there's been an awful lot more literature available, both in books and online and all sorts of ways. People are more aware of it, whether they know it or not. There's a lot more of it out there in popular culture. When I was writing the Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets, there were just about no books available that talked about this from a woman's point of view. There were many books analyzing the history of Christianity and what was false about it and what was not. That was available, but the fact that women were the sufferers primarily was not really made clear. And since then, there have been many, many books written on this subject and bringing out various aspects of it. So, yes, I think there's a lot more literature. There's a lot more knowledge available to people now if they just want to go and look for it. It's there.
Well, and the Internet, too. I mean, I think that's opened up an incredible amount of sharing.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine, actually, she lives here in the United States. She has a Persian husband. She communicates over the Internet and on Twitter and things like that with a lot of women in Iran, and she's actually shared pictures of women out in nature honoring the goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was pretty cool. Apparently, and I think, what was it, the Persian goddess was Anahita, I think?
Yes, Anahita.
Anahita, and Anahita is a hot topic, it seems, in Iran these days.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it.
Well, I mean, I don't know how widespread it is, but, the very fact that, she seems to think that, there's a buzz about it, some progress, I guess.
This can be misleading, though. I mean, the adulation of the Virgin Mary in the Middle Ages, when women were ferociously persecuted in Europe, the cult of Mary was comforting to them, but Mary was always inferior to God. She wasn't divine. She was really an extra special human being. But of course, she was basically a transformation of the goddess,
right,
and an inferior one. So.
Well, let me ask you this, because I gather from women I talk to who were fans of Margaret Starbird, there are more and more progressive Christian women who are starting to see Mary as a feminine face of God, but equal to God, not inferior, as you were just referring. What do you think about that? I mean, it seems to me they are sort of reconstructing their own religion to bring, whether it be Mary Magdalene as Jesus's consort, his full partner, or whether it be Mary, the mother of Jesus. They're starting to, slough off the organized religion view of who Mary and Mary Magdalene are, and reclaiming these archetypes, I guess, or deities, in their own vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the Gnostics said that Mary Magdalene was the apostle to the apostles, and the woman who knows the all, and the ruler of the future kingdom. And of course it was Mary Magdalene who announced the resurrection, and the other apostles had no idea that it was expected. And in, I think it's Luke 24, it says that the apostles were totally ignorant of this, even though apparently Jesus was talking about his expected resurrection. They didn't know anything about it. But Mary and her other female, probably priestesses, who had to do with this kind of ceremony. But until they make Mary totally divine and totally like the Gnostic goddess who actually gave birth to Jehovah, who then rebelled against her. The Gnostic goddess predated God and made and punished him actually for bringing the flood onto the world, and said this was a disobedience on his part. I think until they make the goddess really supreme, they have not achieved the recognition of the historical primacy.
When you say they, do you mean the organized institution of the church?
The women who are trying to reassess the image of Mary and so forth.
Right, okay.
They need to go back to the very beginning and read some of these scriptures that make the goddess predating all gods, the mother of all gods.
Mm-hmm.
In order, I mean, the pendulum has to swing the other way to some extent.
Right.
It's not going to be in the middle.
It has to swing to the feminine before it can swing back toward the middle for balance.
Right.
Shifting over to politics a little bit, and if you're comfortable with this question, I've had Rianne Eisler and Starhawk on the show, and they're very much into politics, and honestly, I don't know if you're quite so much into politics and activism as I happen to know they are. But both of them come out on the side of liberals and Democrats. This current Stupak-like conservative Democrat anomaly aside, do you see a hostility of women's liberation central in the Republican Party? I mean, personally, I wonder how a woman can actually be a Republican, but maybe it's just because I don't know enough Republican women.
Well, I don't think I know any Republican women.
Okay.
I think probably they do try to put back the so-called traditional values, which mean women are inferior. But I really don't know. I'm not as much into politics as Starhawk. But of course, most of my friends are Democrats, everybody I know voted for Obama, so it's not really an issue.
Right. Well, I've during the campaign, I couldn't help but think that as Obama's campaigning, we're hearing his message, and we're sort of feeling his energy and essence, at least what they want us to feel and that sort of thing. It seems like to me, without actually saying the words, it felt like his campaign really sort of reflected what I think most of us think are ideals of the sacred feminine. And I don't know if you can comment on that or not, but I guess I thought that's what people were responding to. They were actually responding to this different way of being that was so opposite to this, patriarchal domination of the Bush administration, the fear-mongering, the power over, the, all of that. And he was so different. It was almost as if he was shifting more into this partnership, collaboration, the needs of the many rather than needs of the few, the rich, the most influential. And I was hearing, in a sense, goddess ideals.
Well, that's all well and wonderful, and I hope it's so. This may be a cynical remark, but it's been my observation that every politician is successful insofar as he is able to say what he knows the audience wants to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's part of his real own belief or not, doesn't matter. He has to be able to say what they want to hear. And I think Obama is very good at that. He's probably the best orator we've had in the government for many, many years. And he's a consummate politician. He's very good at saying what people want to hear. And that's why he got elected.
Right.
Now, what that means in terms of what's actually going to be done, I don't know. We have to wait and see. So.
Yeah. Well, do you have any thoughts on what's happening with Fox News and the teabaggers and all of this other stuff that just seems so fear-mongering and obstructionist and I guess, obviously my bias, but insane.
Yeah, well, I agree with you thoroughly. Unfortunately, I can't say anything detailed about it because I never look at Fox News. The whole idea is just a waste of time as far as I'm concerned.
Well, from the standpoint of, I know we have freedom of speech, but it almost feels like what's happening, though, with Fox News is taken on a whole different character. It's created this, this group of people who don't even know they're being lied to. Yeah. And that, I think, scares me. Maybe I haven't been paying attention to politics long enough, but I don't remember that ever happening before, that we had a media outlet that was, just really distorting truth so badly.
Well, truth has always been distorted, but in my days as a worker on a newspaper, we felt that the press was the only force that kept politicians reasonably honest.
Right.
And that is not the case anymore, for sure. And I think that basically it's money. What's really running the country are the lobbies and the corporations that can buy themselves politicians. And then the politicians vote the way the corporations and the lobbies want them to. So we are being governed by what could be called a plutocracy, or some say a kleptocracy, which means a government by thieves.
That's a good one. Is that a real word? Is that actually?
It's a real word, yes.
Okay. Okay, kleptomaniacs.
In Greek, that's what it means, government by thieves.
Oh, that's a really good one. I have to remember that one. Thank you very much. Well, Barbara, let's focus a little bit back to your work again. What would you say of all your books and everything you've done? Because, you have a lot out there. You've, spent decades of your life trying to teach. What is your most important accomplishment, or do you have a pet project, one of your things that you like the best, or?
I like whatever one I'm currently working on the best.
Okay, fair enough.
That's been the case with each thing I've done.
Okay.
It's always the one right now that I'm interested in.
Well, does that mean it's the man-made God, or do you have something else in the hopper?
Well, at the moment, that's what I'm concentrating on.
Okay.
But actually, the Women's Encyclopedia took me 25 years, so I was kind of concentrating on that for a very long time.
I bet.
And going through 400 reference books. But, I've done a lot of other things simultaneously. I mean, I had a child to raise, unfortunately only one, and as soon as that child got into school, I had 6 hours a day to myself, and you can get a lot done in 6 hours.
Every day, yep.
And then we had one TV set in the house, and it went bad and wouldn't work anymore, and I didn't get around to calling the repairman for 5 years.
So you really had a lot of time.
I got a lot done in those 5 years, too.
Wow.
So turn off the tube if you want to get things accomplished.
Oh, God, that's so hard to do in my house with my husband, whose hand is, actually, I think sometimes his hand becomes the remote, So Barbara, do you have any advice for the feminists of today, how we can help make this shift happen? Is there anything we could be doing better, or things we don't want to repeat, or do you have thoughts on that? Because you certainly have a lot of experience.
Yeah, okay. Give up the phrase, oh, my God, for one.
Have oh, my goddess instead?
Well, that's better.
Have you heard the Goddess Temple in Orange County, instead of Amen, they say Ashi?
Yes.
Okay.
Good. I don't. And also, when you hear anybody talk about the human race as man, object. Say, it's not man, it's humanity.
Yes.
And that mankind is an unacceptable word for everybody. So, just the little phrases, the terminology is very important, because that gives them thoughts that they don't even know about. It's very subtle.
Well, take me back, because when feminism was at its height, I was a little bit too young to be paying much attention. And don't forget, I lived in the South, so I don't even know how much translated through. I remember, though, or at least from hearing other women talk about it, they said feminism was going to unravel the fabric of society. Does that sound familiar to you, or did somebody make that up and tell me?
No, that's they say that all the time.
But how?
Actually, they're tacitly admitting that the fabric of society depends on women.
Ah, that's a very good observation. Well, my question was, when you actually think about what that means, feminism, women, they're saying women's equality would unravel the fabric of society. How did they get anybody to swallow that?
The fabric of patriarchal society, which means men would not have their domestic slaves anymore, and they would have to find some other way to create children for themselves and have somebody take care of them. That fabric may indeed unravel, but of course we now have the glass ceiling, and women have had to go to work. The country is now full of single mothers who must bring up their children and work at the same time, which is pretty rough. Right. So, the men have to pitch in and help with this kind of thing. Well, do you think we're getting more men who are feminists? I hope so. I certainly brought up my son to be a feminist, and he found out that girls really like that. He can get lots of dates, if he says he's a feminist. Now, that would be a good selling point. Tell all the guys out there to turn into feminists, and they won't have so much trouble getting dates. Right. That may be the key. Oh, shoot. Well, Barbara, are there any important ideas you'd like to leave listeners with, or anything I haven't asked you that you want to make sure you mention to our listeners? I would say the most important idea is read. Read and find out your history. Get educated. They won't teach you a lot of these things in school, but the books are out there. So.
And do you have any favorite organizations? If someone wanted to volunteer or support, what would they be?
The American Humanist Association I like very much. I'm a member of that, and I think they're doing good works. Okay.
And I think last time we talked, I meant to ask you, and I don't remember if I did. Have you got a website, or if anyone wanted to reach you, you're off the grid?
Well, I'm all over the net, but other people have put me there. I haven't done that for myself. And I prefer not to have a website because I would be absolutely drowned in emails.
Yes, I'm sure you would. I'm sure you absolutely would.
I'm trying to keep that to a bare minimum.
Well, yeah, because no distractions, so you can keep writing.
Well, yes, that too.
There you go. Well, Barbara, thank you so very much for being on the show again. You've been a delight, and I just want to thank you for all the women you've brought to the goddess and the inspiration you've been, and, I'm looking forward to your new book.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Now, you're welcome to listen to the rest of the show if you like, but I'm going to go ahead and mute you, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Well, listeners, if you're just tuning in, this is Karen Tate, hostess of Voices of the Sacred Feminine, where we discuss Goddess, the Divine Feminine, and the resurging interest in right brain thinking and the feminine consciousness, whether the great she be deity, archetype, or ideal. I am going to take a quick break here, and while I do, for about 60 seconds, I am going to let you listen to a song from Jenna Green, and let's see, which one is it going to be? Let's go with Dance With Me. That sounds like it's something fun and upbeat. Here we go, and I'll be back in just a minute.
You'd had enough, such worry on your face I could tell. You'd out to drink and to stop you from thinking about your day of living hell. Well, the band starts to play and the fiddler is playing, the bar on time's out of steady. How I think it would do some good to take my hand and move your feet. Stop counting your sorrows and getting tomorrow. Let your heart be wild and free. Life is for living and love is for giving, so get on the floor and dance with me.
Well, this is Karen, and I'm back. And as the show comes to a close, I'd like to just make our closing announcements. You've heard me mention before, I'm now the LA Women's and Goddess Spirituality writer for Examiner.com. Check out my articles there. You can find them by going to Examiner.com, or you can find a link on the home page of my website at KarenTate.com. I guess I took my cue from Starhawk with my activism, so you'll have articles there that address the politics of spirituality, from healthcare to sexism and the inhumanity of some political platforms that put profits before people. Also, I'd like you to know that we have started pre-registration for the Cakes for the Queen of Heaven series that the Goddess Temple in Orange County has asked me to teach for them. The classes actually are 11 in all. There's 2 a month starting in January, and they run every other week, but we take a break in April. So if you'd like more information about that, you can go to my website as well, KarenTate.com. There's a full curriculum written there explaining each of the classes in more detail. I'll also be giving a talk in late January at the Sophia Temple, otherwise called Olander. It's the home of Carla and Leigh McCloskey in Malibu. I was there just this past weekend and had raving reviews for my talk, Sacred Feminine for a Sustainable Future. But this next talk is going to be a little bit lighter. It's going to be Sacred Places of Goddess Around the World, and I'll be showing slides all the different places my husband and I have traveled, either together or leading a group across 5 continents. Also, did you know there are free downloadable meditations on my website at KarenTate.com? While you're there, get to know me better. Check out my books. The first one was Sacred Places of Goddess, 108 Destinations, which has garnered prestigious endorsements. And Walking an Ancient Path won a place as a finalist in the USA National Best Books of 2008 awards. In fact, the scholar David Hillman has remarked that the book, Walking an Ancient Path, is an immensely pleasurable and enlightening journey that stands boldly against the patriarchal denigration of the divine feminine. I like saying that. Go to my events page, see if I'll be appearing in a town near you, see what talks I have available to give your group, check out my articles and links page, referring you to people around the world really trying to make a difference. And take advantage of the offer I have on my website in the Goddess Store. Both of my books are $25 plus shipping and handling. Might make a nice Christmas present or solstice present. In fact, think about giving Cakes for the Queen of Heaven classes to yourself for a solstice gift. Or also coming up at the Goddess Temple, I'd like to make mention of this because I was at the first in the series of convocations and really enjoyed it. Ava Park, the foundress of the temple, has a Queen of Your Realm series happening. The first one was in November, and the next one is going to be in subsequent months. Let's see, I think they're going to be February, April, May, and September. And you can take the series or you can take individual events. The focus of the Queen of Your Realm series is about ruling your life in peace, power, and prosperity to save not just yourself or your family, but possibly the world. Each event is $65, but you get a discount if you take the series. And if you've been meaning to tune into my other radio show on CBS, Earth Sacred Places, don't delay. You see, CBS is no longer providing the airtime free, so I've opted not to pay for the airtime and continue the show. But until they take the shows out of the archives, you can hear wonderful guests talking about sacred places of goddess around the world that I interviewed in places like India, Nepal, Britain, France. We've talked about sacred display objects, Sheila Nagigs, what unfortunately some people out there in the world call the ancient Barbie dolls, sacred artifacts of goddess. There's over a dozen shows there for an undetermined amount of time, so listen before they're gone. And to reach those shows, you can download them by going to psychiconair.com. Look up my name as a host in the archives, and there they will be. Well, listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on Voices of the Sacred Feminine, please tell your friends to tune in, and please add us as one of your Blog Talk favorites. Even consider signing up as a listener and have reminders of upcoming shows sent directly to your email box. And as I say goodnight, I'd like to leave you with something written by Ava Park from the Goddess Temple. She says, "What is devotion? Devotion to Mother Earth, to Goddess, to life. With devotion as our foundation, we could not mistreat, exploit, or dishonor each other, the earth, or animals. With devotion as our foundation, we would share what we had and poverty would end. Violence would simply be unthinkable. Devotion is so lacking in our world, and yet it is the very foundation of a beautiful life." So thank you, Ava. You're always sending such inspirational things in the mail. I appreciate it, and I, in turn, share it with listeners. So I am going to let you listen to Golden Age by the Dragon Ritual Drummers to close out the show. Please tune in tomorrow. Remember, we have Genevieve Vaughn as our guest, and I'm sure you'll enjoy listening to her ideas about gift economy, and we'll hear firsthand from her about how her relationship is with the goddess Sekhmet and how she came to build the Sekhmet Temple outside Las Vegas. So good night, listeners, until tomorrow, and this is the Dragon Ritual Drummers.